Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 51. Today, we will be making some plans, which will help us expand ever deeper into the undeveloped regions of the Republic. There will be two major developments. The first one will be a new construction yard, in which we will implement some of the lessons we learned while developing Adumski. It will also be a hybrid, using both helicopters and road vehicles, but this time, I will make sure to use bigger helipads, so more choppers can be accommodated at the same time. We will also start planning that new city I talked about in the last episode. It will be in a more central location, compared to the other two, so I am hopeful that we can develop it into the new capital city over time. The first couple buildings we will place down today will most certainly be on the bigger side, so we will try to plan for it being a pretty big place. The site I chose for it will most certainly allow for some sprawling urbanization. Before we get to those things though, I want to get rid of those leftover neon blue box cars. They still stick out like a sore thumb, among their more subdued brethren. Next, a viewer floated a pretty great idea about that anniversary statue we built in the last episode. We could bring a cableway up to it, and maybe build a couple extra amenities around it. To prepare the area, I think adding a circular footpath around the statue would make it more touristy. Yes, that will do nicely. Thankfully, all of those can be reached by helicopters. We can also add a couple bushes inside the ring. Before choosing the leisure amenity for this place, we should build the cable car station. It would help if the cable connection was facing toward the city. There was a viable connection there, but I still added two more towers, just to keep the spacing more or less consistent. Choosing what to build up here was a bit harder than I expected. Things like restaurants and bars would require us to haul food, meat, and alcohol up here for them to function, so they are a no-go. I don't want to build a tall lookout tower either. I want the statue to dominate the skyline. An art gallery would have been okay, but it doesn't have a footpath connection, so that one was also out. This museum, however, looks like a good candidate. It's relatively big, and it also isn't very tall, so it won't take away the limelight from the statue. We do need some more gentle slopes for the footpaths though, so a bit of smoothing is in order. In retrospect, the museum was fitting. The real-life statue also has a museum inside as far as I know. I think I will leave it at that for now. Having a restaurant up here would have been nice, but the amount of infrastructure required to keep it operating made it unfeasible. Next, I really want to fix this wonky rail track. Oh yes, much better. The turns are not so sudden anymore, and we managed to keep the road looking decent as well. Now, I was trying to decide if we really need to make this junction fully accessible from every direction, but ultimately decided it was unnecessary. For our current needs, only allowing trains to enter and leave from one direction is enough. And if we need to add the rest of the sides later, we can do it no problem. Alrighty then, time to choose the site for the third construction yard. This field next to this mountain range looks like a good place. Now, we are too far away from the rest of our construction yards, so I didn't even attempt to level out the area, but the slopes look gentle enough, so I think we can just get on with it. It's always a bit of a relearning experience when I try to build one of these. I so rarely need to do it, that I forget what exactly we need to include in the meantime. Of course, we need an aggregate storage for gravel. Let's add a truck loading station before I forget it. And we have the second ever fire in the vehicle factory. It's always a bit of a tense moment when this happens, then I see that we have 6 helicopters on the job, and I calm down a bit. Next, we can add the aggregate unloading station for the gravel deliveries. Next, the concrete plant. For that, we will of course need to add a cement silo, so we can store as much of it as we can on site, and not run out halfway through a big construction project. We will of course need a dry bulk station to bring in the cement. The gravel input is pretty straightforward. It can be done with a couple conveyor towers. Well, maybe after we move the dry bulk station back a little, to make some room. And that's it for the resource inputs for the concrete plant. Next comes the asphalt factory. For this gravel connection, we will need to add a split into the conveyors, because I would like to add a cargo landing pad for the helicopters. It's a bit wonky, but we will manage to straighten it out in the end. Anyways, in the meantime the third fuel distribution house was completed in Adamski, so we better order the trucks for it, before it's too late. We are starting to use the vehicle factory more and more. I think we need to add a second commuter train for it in the next episode. Okay, what were we doing? Oh yeah, we need to add a bitumen storage for the asphalt plant. And for that, we will need a liquid drop-off station of course. That's the 3 basic resources done. Let's add the helipads, and be sure to use the big ones this time. I will do the same I did last time. I will open the info window of an already fully operational construction office, and use it as a cheat sheet, just to make sure we have all the necessary resources covered. For the gravel heliport, we will need to use the cargo version. Good thing we already built a splitter into one of the conveyor lines. The rest are pretty straightforward. An open storage for the 4 bulky materials, and a warehouse for the 2 component types. Of course, we will need a cargo heliport for this one too, this time using a factory connection. For the components, I think I will risk using a single helipad. They are still the materials we use to smallest amounts of. And that will take care of the main production and storage facilities. Next up, the rail tracks for the deliveries. I didn't really like this junction. Let's use the tried and tested 2 to 5 version we have in Adamski. That's better. Obviously, it's a bit of a waste of space, but if there is one thing we have an abundance of, it's free real estate. Let's fine-tune some of the curves. I think the gravel branch can be made to look a bit more symmetrical. And this is where I will end up straightening out that mess of conveyor lines going toward the asphalt plant. I didn't like the way the helipads were causing the bitumen branch to stick out so much, so I decided to bring it in closer, which made it necessary to rearrange the belts, resulting in a neater looking arrangement. Happy little accident. There. Now it follows the grid more closely. As a result, we can bring in the bitumen branch's rail tracks closer as well. There. This way, it all looks a bit more organized than it really is. Using the Alexandergrad branch as an entry point to the rest of the network seems like the logical choice. Same goes for the roads, we will use the ones going to the steel mill as the entry point. As usual, I will first build the surrounding infrastructure, and only start constructing the buildings when those are done. As I've said, this will be a hybrid construction yard, the same as Adamski, using both helicopters and road vehicles. In this episode, I will only add the road vehicle offices. I'm not completely sure where to put the helicopter offices yet. And of course, I will use the biggest offices I have access to, thanks to these modded versions. They can house 32 vehicles each. That's plenty enough. Of course, this will result in some massive production orders at the vehicle factory. I might end up adding 2 extra trains to its commuter line, instead of just 1. With the main buildings ready to be built in the new construction yard, we can turn our attention to our new city. My first thought was to build it here. There is some half-decent amount of room available, but ultimately decided to go with another place. I really didn't like the messy shoreline. This one looked more promising. A big empty field, right at where the two rivers merge together. And there's that little island too, which is a prime location for another tall monument in the future, Statue of Liberty style. This simple crossroads will be where we start, and see where we go from there. Seeing it high up, I immediately saw an opportunity to use the middle as a roundabout. Now that the new traffic system is right around the corner, I am more eager to start using them in this game. My first instinct was to use one with a radius of 3 tiles. It will turn out to be a bit of a mess, so I will end up going with 4 instead. Yeah, that's not going to work. Just delete it and start over, it's too messed up already. Yeah, using a 4-tile radius will be fine. Now, this was pretty much fine, but my perfectionism couldn't bear having that extra node there, so I will end up messing it up. I will leave it as is, and start placing the buildings around it, but I am pretty sure I will make another stab at it in the next episode. This is where I will leave it, and we can revisit it later. It's already in my to-do list, so I don't think I will forget it. Before we go further, let's take a look at the progress of our other projects. The new cross-country rail line is going rather nicely. Now, let's start placing some of the core services. Instead of using small shops, I will build a big shopping mall this time. Don't get me wrong, I am 100% sure we will still use smaller local stores dotted around the city, but it would be nice to have a big one in the center of town. The downside of this one is that it only has one parking space, so we will have to use a continually running meat delivery truck for it. We cannot tell it to wait for a full unload. I don't know what to place in the middle of the roundabout yet. Of course, we cannot put a road connection going into the circle, so whatever ends up in there, it will have to use a decorative ground texture for its driveway, and use footpaths for access. Just a spoiler warning, I will end up placing the city hall in there, but I'm not entirely sold on that idea. I think I will simply use some kind of decoration, like those circular murals I've used in some of my old playthroughs. Anyways, looking at the different culture building options, I remembered that the stuff on the mountain should be done by now. And they mostly are. We only need to add power to the area, and it's almost ready to go. Let's place the substation in a less than obvious place, so it doesn't stick out too much. And for the power lines, we will of course use underground cables, for aesthetic reasons. We also have one last cable tower left to build. It has the resources, only waiting for workers. But that can wait, let's continue building the new city. I still wasn't sure which culture building to use. I'd like to avoid repeating some of the bigger stuff if I can. This pyramid museum will be good. I was flirting with the idea of adding a TV station, but I will end up doing it a bit later. It would have looked amazing, but the footprint was interfering with the roundabout. I wish the game allowed non-rectangular footprints. That diagonal cutout on the corner of the building would have been a perfect fit. Oh well, it is what it is. After the hospital, I was about to place the kindergarten, but I think I will place those in the residential districts, instead of the center of town. I might do the same for schools too, so this one might not be here for long. As for higher education, we have a lot of technical universities already, but no medical one. Let's remedy that situation. Just to be safe, I will also add a fuel station. This time, I'll use the one-way version, just because we haven't used it yet. Now the obligatory train station. No city is complete without one. Just so we are on the same page, the one I placed down now is temporary. I will most definitely look for something bigger and possibly a bit fancier in the workshop. But, I do like that we managed to find a home for it, as one of the exits on the roundabout. Of course, we will need a police station. Now, I wanted to add the vanilla prison, since having such a big city will inevitably result in a pretty big uptake in prisoners. I will change my mind on it later though, so it will be removed later on in the episode. I mean, we still need it, but maybe not in the center of town. Let's not forget to add a bus stop. This one will be used for drop-offs mostly, bringing passengers and workers in from the outskirts. They can work in the buildings, or walk to the train station to catch a ride for out-of-town work. This is where I will place the city hall. As I've said previously, I will most likely move it somewhere else, and just use some regular decoration from the workshop for the roundabout instead. And adding all these footpaths of course completely invalidates my attempts to remove the nodes from the road, so there's that. Sadly, the tried and tested circular footpaths around the intersections don't seem to work so well here. I think it's time to add that junction to the Alexandergrad branch, so we can add the new construction yard to the network. Once again, it's a Y junction, instead of a T. Although I will most likely change it in the next episode. It might help if we allowed trains to come in from Alexandergrad too, since we will need to bring in some steel from time to time. Now, that secret police HQ might be a bit too close to the tracks. But then again, I might end up using a train station that has a big front building, which will push the tracks closer to the riverbank. So I will leave things as they are for now. I still wanted to add a TV station, even if the footprint prevented me from placing it next to the roundabout. Behind the medical university will do just fine. There are still a lot of things we need to take care of. We need to add consumer goods and meat deliveries, power, heating, etc. And I'm sure we will end up moving some of the buildings, so this is most definitely not the final form of the center of town. And those rail tracks have a pretty noticeable dip, so we will need to wait for terrain leveling to become available before I place those too. Seeing how abysmally slow this excavator is, I think we will replace them, once we don't have so many vehicles queued up in the factory. Speaking of, it seems the bulldozers we ordered are done. Let's send them to their new homes. First, I send them to the local road depot. Not because it was necessary, but because I want them to refuel before they leave the area. By sending them over first, they will head to the local gas station. And while they do that, we can start looking where they can be reassigned to. We have 2 old ones in Lukovo, waiting for a replacement. There's 2 more in one of the neighboring COs, so that's 2 more we can send over. Here's where I ran into some problems. It seems the helicopter construction office cannot accept this particular bulldozer model for some reason. I couldn't figure out what was so special about it. There were enough empty slots, and it's a proper construction machinery, but for some reason, it cannot be used with helicopters. That was a bit of a bummer. I ended up rebuying those 2 bulldozers out of frustration. The last 2 were in the old border office we rebuilt not too long ago. The two we couldn't use will be kept around, I'm sure we will make use of them later. Anyways, while I wasn't happy with the way things turned out, a new excavator model was released to the Western markets, and it's much better than anything we currently use. So I think we will end up replacing everything with it, once we clean up the queue in the car factory. Oh wow, this guy is so slow. It's still struggling to finish this piece of road. We will definitely need to replace them with that new American model. At this point, I wanted to finish building the new mountaintop area, so I stopped construction on the new yard. Everything else is finished, we only need to build the substation. In the meantime, we can start buying the cable cars. Since they are pretty much identical, I think I will keep things interesting, and buy equal amounts of each. And they are running. Once the area has power, we will start seeing people walking around the statue. By the way, the reason why those cable cars were able to run was because the station at the bottom of the hill already had power. If none of the endpoints have electricity, then it won't run. Hey, people are already up here. It seems we don't really need power for the museum to operate. Still, no reason to stop building the substation now. There we go. A nice relaxing national monument our citizens can visit. I still wish we could have used some other attractions, but they would have required goods deliveries, which would have messed up the aesthetics of the place. With that done, we can continue building the construction yard. At this point, I just told the helicopters to build everything indiscriminately. As for the rail tracks, I think it's time to temporarily pause building this cross-country project. It's mostly here to keep the track layers busy when nothing else is going on. And right now, something else is going on. I'll just let Nightingale finish its current trip, and only pause then. Since the last episode, I got a couple extra name suggestions for different areas. The Aluminium Industrial District will be called Penkovsk. The new construction yard's new name will be Bobinsky. Sorry, the only way I could make Polly pronounce Bob correctly was if I separated the Bob from the Insky. Otherwise it would say Babinski. There was one more name left for me to place, and the request was specifically to name an airport with it. So, it was time to take the first step towards building our very own airport. Today, we will only place the runway. There was no time left to really flesh out the nitty-gritty of an entire airport layout. I decided to go for the full 1,000 meters long from the start. That's long enough for every vanilla airplane to use it. So, our new airport will be called Bielo Polje. I had to do some keyboard gymnastics to make Polly pronounce it this way. I think from now on, I will only refer to it as Bielo, so the sake of brevity. There were a lot of names suggested for the car factory, none of which I found to really fit. Sorry everyone who tried to help me with this one. So I just went with this. Automobil Zavod. Originally, I wanted it to be Automobilny Zavod, but that was too long, so I had to shorten it. It just means car factory, as far as I know. And Polly's pronunciation is way off, so I think I'll just call it Automobil, or just Auto from now on. The tracks going towards Penkovsk are already under construction. I might end up pausing them, so the ones leading to Babinski are done first, so we can start using it as soon as possible. Well, what do we have here? It seems I managed to catch that elusive boxcar I've been trying to get rid of at last. Finally, we only have the most up-to-date wagons working in the Republic. Let's round out the numbers to a nice 25 boxcars. And with those good news, let's see what's coming in episode 52, which will mark the half-year point in the lifetime of the series. We will of course keep working on the new city, keep adding service buildings that we've missed, like sports, not to mention power, heating, etc. I will also take a quick look around the workshop, and see if I can find a fitting train station, and I already know which decoration to get for the roundabout. And of course, we will continue planning our new airport, and finish setting up the new construction yard. It still needs power, the helicopter construction offices, and I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to set up a fuel distribution outpost next to it, like we did in Adamski. Apart from those, we will continue fine-tuning things, and if we have time, it might not be a bad idea to start looking into building a place where we can start mass-producing chemicals. That was still one of the main reasons for all we did today. Anyways, I hope you liked the video. If you did, you can support me on Ko-fi, for which you can find a link in the description. If you are not the donating kind of viewer, that's fine too. You can still support me by dropping a like and subscribing to the channel, which just might motivate me to make more. Until then, see you later.